So we're gonna start, and I am very glad to be there with you today. I am Benjamin Jean, the founder of ISRU, Open Innovation Consulting firm, and the title of this roundtable is Fostering Disruptive Innovation through Open Collaboration in the Space Industry. I have very great speakers today with me, so I'm just let you introduce yourself. You can start.
Okay. Hello, I'm Louis-David Benyayer. I'm a professor in a business school, ESCP here in Paris, and I specialized in how digital technologies change business models and competition dynamics. And it's been about 10 years now since that I started being very much interested into how open source, open innovation, open manufacturing are changing business models and competition dynamics in many industries, including space, and I'm really happy to have that opportunity to have that fruitful conversation.
Thank you, Miriam.
Good afternoon. I'm Miriam Ayas. I work in the Knowledge Transfer Group at CERN, the European Organization for Nuclear Research, based in Geneva. And in the Knowledge Transfer Group, what we try to do is find application of technologies developed at CERN outside of high-energy physics. So these applications range from medical imaging to space to many different things. And I'm basically taking care of the legal aspects of this technology transfer, including the licensing and the open source software, open source hardware licensing models that we use to achieve that objective. Thank you.
Thanks, Annelise.
Hi everyone, I'm Annelise. I'm Vice President of the Federation Open Space Makers Associations. This association aims to open up the ecosystem of space infrastructures and also to open the space sector to any citizens who want to contribute by any means to the space sectors. And on my free time, I am a freelance web developer.
Hello, everybody. I'm Philippe Cree. I'm Research Relations Director at the Eclipse Foundation. First of all, I'm very pleased to be here because I start my career as a software engineer at the French agency in Cree. And at this time, I was working on trying to identify some dead code in some Fortran application there. So it was really very interesting to do that. And finally, I decided to pursue a PhD when I came back to France after my civil service. And I'm involved in prototyping environment since then and development environment. At the Eclipse Foundation, we are, at least my department is dealing with research projects, mainly European research projects. And our main role is to help industries and researchers to work together through a common open source. So we really try to remove the kind of friction that we can face between researchers, where some might be reluctant to give their code in open source, and industry who won't be reluctant to use some open source code. Thank you.
Thank you. As you have seen, we have very great people, and from different kind of organization, from research, from industry, from community non-profit association. So what we will try to do with you today is to show how open source or open models might contribute and might be useful for innovation in lots of different kind of industry, and in the spatial industry mainly. So we have, I think, something like 40 minutes of discussion with all of these speakers, and after that we will try to keep 10 to 15 minutes to interact, to have some question from the public, yourself. So let's start just now, and I have few questions for first one is for you, Philippe. Can you introduce from your insight and from your view about how open source is in IT industry? How did open source appear and develop in the IT industry?
So I will start with a tagline. I will say that free software changed the world. Actually, when we think about the World Wide Web, when we think about TCP/IP, which are the way that we can do today internet, it has been open source from the beginning. So it's and in my speech I will mention that today is still the case as well. So initially, industry were really using open source because it was very valuable in terms of cost. They could share a cost, they could divide by 4. For example, if you want to deploy a server using a Linux machine instead of an IBM machine in the early 80s or 90s, it will divide by 4 the cost of the deployment of your solution on such servers. We have IBM as well. I had the chance to be a part of this wonderful adventure of the Eclipse fund, of the Eclipse IDE at this time, and IBM wanted to already just to mutualize all the effort of all our teams who are developing development environment for in different topics on different languages. And each time they were asking the same question, how to build a nice interface for the developer, how to provide helpful documentation and so on. So why not build this core technology, then after, on top of that, everybody will build his own language and provide his own features for the developers. And finally, this platform started to be so well adopted that, and because of this plugin, that people could bring their own community on view and reuse it, and for modeling, using for science, using for so many different domains, that for this reason that this development environment start to be so famous. So again, it was for cost aspects. But what we see today, and for this reason, I think that open source is still really disruptive and is changing the world. That when you see big data, when you see artificial intelligence, or when you see cloud computing, all these things are based on open source solutions. We are talking about TensorFlow, we are talking about Hadoop, and all these kind of technologies are totally open source. And it's because of that, innovation can be deployed and can be applied, and people adopt it very quickly.
Thanks. And Louis-David, do you have any, I would say, striking and very successful example from open source, different kind of business or innovative or innovation domain?
Well, as Philippe said, information technology in general has been widely supported by open source for the last 2 decades, right? And a lot of the software that are used for main applications run on open source software. And even as consumers or as internet users, we're using them without knowing sometimes that we're using them. But if I want to be more specific, I would say, of course, that open source is a very wide array, and not all people contributing to open source share the same profile. And I think it's important to distinguish between activists or single web or software developer that produce in small and tiny communities a very high-end and specialized software, to big firms that are leveraging open source to make their business bigger or stronger. And I think this is something also that has been quite visible over the last decade. I would say, for example, when it comes to companies that are leveraging open source for doing a business in software, I think there are 2 examples that we can speak of as the acquisitions 4 years ago, first of GitHub by Microsoft, which is quite ironical when we know how hard was the fight from Microsoft against open source. And the second one is the acquisition from IBM of Red Hat for an amount which is quite significant, of 34, if I'm not wrong, $34 billion. So someone could say that somehow open source can be perceived as a good business opportunity. And the other type of example that I could use is how big tech companies are leveraging open source to have their model grow bigger. And Android, in that case, for Google, was, of course, one very smart way of having their services used by a massive number of users, right? But if we go more into manufacturing-oriented environment, in automotive industry and self-driving technologies that rely strongly on software, we saw a lot of efforts by all of these players, whether they are car manufacturers or big tech firms, to release in open source part of their code. And I think once again, it's a reason. One of the reasons behind that is that alone they wouldn't have the necessary resource to push those developments. Another example that goes a bit beyond software and goes more into collaboration, open innovation, and co-development is what we've been observing in pharmaceutical industries over the last 15 years. In those industries, the rule was more about protecting innovations, and innovations were developed internally. And we saw a massive change in those industries. Up that today, it is estimated that about 70% of the new molecules are developed by open innovation programs, which is, of course, a significant evolution. So, a lot of examples, and maybe one thing to conclude or to move on to another part of the discussion is, of course, there are clear advantages. You mentioned cost reduction, but we could also say speed of development. We could also say different type of ideas, but it comes with a cost, right? And openness is a trade-off. Because, of course, a company that goes into open model gets the benefit of these new ideas and resources, but it trades off the control of the value capture. And that's, of course, the trade-off that all companies are included in when deciding about how to open.
Yeah. Thank you. And I think what is quite interesting to share is the way both private and public organizations are working together in such community-based, I would say, dynamics or approaches. I think there is a lot of work to do on cultural change, helping people to think differently the way they are innovative together. And there is a point from intellectual property practices, I think so, and the way value is shared and is protected within each industries or organizations. And maybe, Miriam, can you share your view, insights about the way the CERN are using open source or are doing open science based on such models?
Yes, for sure. So at CERN, we are a host lab, essentially, meaning we have constructed a particle accelerator, and we welcome people from all over the world to come and carry out their experiments there. So it is fundamentally a collaborative model. If there's one thing that we know how to do apart from particle accelerators, it's collaboration. So it's really in our DNA. And we develop a lot of technologies, and all those technologies that are developed there, we want them to also have an impact, a positive impact on society. And to maximize that impact and the dissemination and make sure that it actually reaches everyone around, we try to use a number of different dissemination tools. So open source is one of those tools. We find that it's actually very useful in a collaborative model that we use at CERN when you have dozens, if not hundreds, of institutes that participate in the development of a specific software, for instance, a specific technology. It's usually, at least in that world, in the world of research, it's very easy to agree that the results are going to be shared in an open source manner for everybody to enjoy, for everybody to pick up, modify, and feed back to the common effort, to the common development effort. So this is something that is very much valued at CERN. So we don't do everything open source, but it is really part of the normal way of working and disseminating the knowledge that we have. It helps in many different ways. Jumping back on what was said before, there are a lot of benefits of cost cutting, etc. But we have found in some of our projects that actually having certain software or technologies disseminated through open source means have really brought tenfold maybe the number of applications that we could use those technologies for, ones that we couldn't have never imagined before. You know, when you do, for instance, a timing card to make sure that you synchronize the beam in your accelerator, you don't necessarily think that it can be used in the telecoms, or you know, as a fraud detection, or you know, in a subwater telescope or detector. So it's truly beneficial, not only through the development effort, but also then in the application, and all of this comes back and feeds back through to the developments.
Thanks. And I think what is interesting too is to think how this model, which might work in other industry, might be transposed in space industry. And within the space industry, I think Open Space Makers is one of the best example of what might be done from a community perspective. Annelise, can you express how you are assisting your members in order to helping them to doing open source stuff, I would say, and maybe some kind of differences you see regarding what is space industry, export control, or the way you are working on open models, and in the same time trying to find just a convergence between other things you have to do with.
Yes, there are around maybe 20 open projects or sub-projects within the Federation activities. And from, for example, I don't know, reusable launcher to open liquid rocket engine to in situ resource utilization project and so on. So a lot of projects. And yes, we met some limitation regarding regulation context, and we help them, the association federation help them to try to adapt our collaborative approach to such regulation context within the federation activities, because how do we secure the open collaboration we have inside the federation, the association, and how do we meet the aims of our contributors who want to contribute in an open way, in open collaboration and in open source. So we have so there are some regulation about dual use regulation, or military materials and AC-limited materials regulation, and some of our projects are may be subject to such regulation. So to comply with such regulation, we adapt the association to and we set up a new governance system to try to identify the technologies and the goods we have in every of our projects to comply with such regulation, and we put some efforts in the control in the communication of technical and sensible information, for example, to make sure that we don't publish any unauthorized information. So that's a lot of adaptation from the federation to make sure that our collaborative approach remain the key principle in our activities. We also had to rethink our open source licenses to include such limitations, such restriction, for example. So we worked with our partner InnoCube, which helped us to define the new license, new open source like license, making sure federation ensures to ensure the development and the provision of the federation project in compliance with such regulations. So we adopt an open source like license, like a modular license with avenants and which are like exceptions or options we can adapt in function of the situation. If for example, if we want to have a commercial use or not, if depending of the geographical territory, for example. So we adapt a new legal system, IP system, to make sure to integrate fully our activities regarding the regulation context.
When we were preparing this session, we spoke with Philippe about patents and the way patents are working with open source. I think it's an interesting question to have in our heads, saying, okay, if we want to secure collaboration, do we need to use such tools, or is it good or not regarding the collaboration we want to have with other people? What's your feeling about it?
Well, from the beginning, the key principle inside the federation is to keep like modularity and interoperability inside the federation, to be able to use third-party resources and try to include such resources to the open source project. So we discuss a lot about the patent at the beginning when we start creating the federations, and while we adapt we haven't adopted a patent system inside federation. We went to open source licenses. So, yeah.
And Philippe, do you see other practice about patents in other kind of industries? Or?
Yeah, we used to say patents, it's protect an ID, and IP protects your software as a copyright. And so for us, it's very important. And we see in history that if you put everything in patent, you limit the innovation. And I discovered when I was working on this preparation of this on this roundtable that actually in 1911, Henry Ford launched a suit against a guy who had a patent on gasoline engines. And this guy was asking $15 for each engine you will create. And Henry Ford wanted to really develop and deploy as much as possible cars in US. He didn't want to pay this amount of money to this guy. And then he was able to sue him and he was able to discover that his engine was a little bit different from this guy. So the patent didn't work anymore. And because of that, he could launch and really open, and he created another initiative where actually people could share freely their patent together, and then innovation really started at this point on the cars. And when you see today Elon Musk with electrical cars, it does exactly the same thing. So the patents are also free. So it's free to share, free to use. So I think, yeah, your ID is protected, but at least you don't limit others to reuse it and to be able to deploy it.
I think another example, based on Microsoft and open source story, we can share is the Open Invention Network, which is an American corporate actor, is gathering patents from a lot of people in order to protect open source, saying, okay, if you have any patents we can use to protect open source developments regarding automotive, regarding phone industry, such kind of industry, let's share them together, and we will be stronger together. And what is interesting is that OIN was founded against Microsoft practices this time, and today Microsoft is part of OIN. So there is quite a change regarding this last 10 years, saying, okay, even Microsoft is embracing open source and trying to helping people to secure collaboration for open source models. So just some fruit. Louis-David, can you give us some overview regarding your academic perspectives about open collaboration model and strategies?
So there are many ways companies or organizations enter into that broad theme, right? There is something that doesn't come up naturally into one's mind, but maybe sometimes the first step is contributing to open source before releasing something we have developed internally. And sometimes big companies are contributing to open source or open science project for business reasons. And this is also something that we can connect way beyond, let's say, transactional benefits such as reducing costs. It aims to increase independence or sovereignty. I can take the example of Google Maps and OpenStreetMap. So Google Maps, okay, we used it every day, and it's been for years free to use to access the API for any company to have a map appearing on their website, right? So when you would buy a train ticket, you would have the map of the surroundings of the city so that you can move around, right? And for years, it's been pretty much for free. And a couple of years ago, Google said, hey, well, now that you're all using it, well, we're changing the rules. And now we're going to increase the toll. And each time you will hit the API, we'll charge you for something, right? And what appeared is that the months after the announced by Google Maps, we saw an increase, like the hockey stick curve of the US startups, right? A huge increase of contributions to OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap is pretty much the Wikipedia of mapping systems. Volunteers contribute on their spare time to update the map, right? And the hockey stick curve wasn't done thanks to the efforts of the traditional open science activists, right? It was interesting to notice that Amazon, Facebook, and other big tech companies hired several hundreds of people to contribute to OpenStreetMap. And of course, it wasn't for the sake of having a free and open source repository of mapping. It was one way for them to be more independent from Google Maps. So I would say that's something that somehow sometimes is overlooked, right? As for business purposes, companies may have an interest into contributing to an open source effort. Well, then now, if we move to the more traditional way of why should I open something, I think something important is to keep in mind that it's not a binary decision like you are either open or closed, right? The dimensions are numerous to define a scope of openness. Of course, it's not the same thing to open the code of a software and the data that is produced by that software. And it's not the same thing of opening the design of an engineering such as Tesla and opening up the data that is produced by the connected car. Similarly, what we have discussed already highlights also other dimensions. It's not the same thing to share with public and to share with selected partners that you have agreed on ways of collaborating, right? So what to share is the first dimension, with who you share is another dimension. And maybe you would share with some partners, but not with the public, or reversely. And the last dimension I want to highlight is what you permit people to do when you share. Do you authorize them to modify, to distribute? But even how do you make it possible for them to make some money out of it? So I just wanted to stress that there are many configurations of openness, and that's not one homogeneous, let's say, situation. So if we use that, we could say that every open initiatives defines what is closed. Because if you define what is open, you define what is closed. And interestingly, in the Tesla case, it's true to say that Tesla opened some of their patents for some of their technology, but they kept secret and patented other parts of their business, which is the battery production. So they said pretty much, okay, you can go wild on manufacturing cars with our patents, but we keep secret the technology for battery and electricity management in the car. So it was one way for them, let's say, to, of course, get a grip on that very attractive market. I would just conclude with one example of a recent research that is interesting to share here because they've been investigated the open collaboration and open innovation practices in the military. And you can guess that in the military, firms and governments really want to get an advantage against their opponents, and secret is something very important. And apparently in that research, they showed that it was possible to balance the two opposite objectives, which is first benefiting from external efforts and at the same time keeping some secrecy. So that opens a wide array, I think, of possible configurations. So I would say that the forms vary, the situations vary, and sometimes it's also not for purely economic direct reason that people engage in those practices, but also for more strategic reasons, such as sovereignty, independence, and access to a bigger market.
Thank you. And taking this to space industry, Anis, can you give us some more example of where you think open source models might offer some solutions to the needs we have?
Yeah, in my view, using the standardizing and innovating in areas where in which there is a lack of standard is essential, like in the area where interoperability is essential. Is for me, it's also it will benefit from open source or open collaboration. For me, open collaboration facilitate the shared value, which create then the standards. So it's like a virtuous circle. So I have some example in mind, like for example the SAT-NOGS, Satellite Networks Open Ground Station, which is a project on a distributed ground station, open ground station. So it's basically do-it-yourself, you build your own ground station, open ground station. So there is open source software and open hardware. So everything is available on the website, and you can have access to such documentation if you want. So the more there are contributors, the more the people will work with such standards, the SAT-NOGS, and the more you create standards. So it's like virtuous circle. And I have another example in mind with Lockheed Martin interface docking system, which I think publish an open in-orbit, an open interface in-orbit docking, and you can have access to all the documentation and basically build your own in-orbit servicing. So, and again, this is a kind of virtuous circle where you share. You shared your in open collaboration, and it facilitates the creation of standards, because when everyone contributes, you share the values between those contributors, and you facilitate the creation of standards in those areas. So.
Anything? Thank you. And what's just another idea in mind, but we are speaking about open collaboration models within the space industry, saying its space industry is big enough and it's complex enough to be some kind of systemic, to have a systemic approach to create and to share value together. And what is interesting too is that because other domains or other sectors are doing the same, we can cross some kind of resources from such as telecom to or just automotive or phone to space industry, and to find what might be mutualized between different sectors. One example I have in my head is SATCOM, for instance. The way you are using SATCOM is different than the way you are doing Earth communication, but because there is a lot of software now, we can share the value, and the software we are using in SATCOM can be quite similar to software we are using in Earth communication. So there is some cross value we can share between different sectors, thanks to open collaboration models. Even if at the beginning you don't think about it, you can have such kind of collaboration which might be very useful and interesting. Regarding the research and the science part of what open models might share, Philippe, what are for you the most relevant cases where leading research in open source did appear?
Okay, I would like to start with a story. When I was working for IBM, I visit one of our customers, which is Bosch, that you certainly know, and it was in early 2000. And these guys, when I was talking with them about open source, because I was already using and developing open source, these guys say, no way, no open source in our company, it will never pass this door, it's not for us. We developed everything from scratch. 4 or 5 years later, I came back, almost to the same lab, and these folks have changed their mind, and because they told me, yeah, we had to bring some internships for only 3 months, and these guys in 3 months could not develop anything, and they were learning a bunch of interesting frameworks in their university and schools, and they wanted to be able to use it and say, we don't care, actually, they are building prototypes, so there is no impact in business, so they can do it on their side, and that's fine. And then they realized that in 3 months, these guys were able to develop amazing application that their engineers in 2 or 3 years were not able to develop from scratch. So they start to think a little bit more about that and say, but okay, you use this stuff, but can we ask for this improvement? There is a bug, you mentioned a bug, can you ask to have this bug fixed? And the students say, yes, of course, I'm in touch with the developers of this software, and they start exchanging. And then Bosch realized that, wow, not only these guys are developing some software which is used by somebody else, but by the way, they got feedbacks from my software, they got some improvement, they got some tests, knowing how much it costs to do some tests on software. For them, it was pretty interesting. I said, okay, let's give it a try. We have a component here, not very strategic for us. Let's push it in open source to see how people will react. Of course, it was Bosch, and so people start to be interested, and all their companies who wanted to work with Bosch start to using it, and they start having lots of feedbacks and useful feedbacks, and they realize that the value that using and contributing to open source can bring to them. So finally, in 2015, when I met them again, it was when I started working with Eclipse Foundation as a research relations director. These guys decided to be strategic member of the foundation because they want to influence the foundation, because their idea was, we don't want to depend on GAFA. And for this reason, we realized that we are doing the IoT, Internet of Things, and we realized that all the platforms developed today are mainly based on GAFA technologies, and at some point, all the others will die, and only the GAFA will survive. So what we want to do, we want to have this serenity and to be independent of these folks, and let's build a platform together, actually a European platform together. And they decide to build this platform. And now they have a relationship, not only industry relationship, but also with researchers. And the idea is to bring new ideas from research, and they have this possibility because open source is a wonderful way to create a cluster, to have this to be this cluster between different organizations, and you can bring an industry, you can bring researchers, you can bring software developers, software vendors, and this guy can work together. And if some of them decide at some point to leave, he will not leave with the code. The code will always stay here. It's open source, so everybody can keep it. And you can bring another university, you can bring another industry, you can bring another software vendor, and the code is still usable. So it's, I think it's the important aspect of how I see the collaboration between industry and research.
Yes, I would say collaboration is mindset. It's a way of doing things. And when we speak about open innovation, open science, we are more focused on processes, saying how can we organize or work together with other people in order to do some things open. Miriam, can you share with us the way, I would say, the research and the development processes in the CERN are more open, maybe, or are being more open and opener?
They've always been quite open, I have to say. Somewhere along the way, the lawyers came and said, hey, be careful. You can't distribute everything, there are liability questions, etc. So that kind of put a little bit of a break on things. But then this is how we started, putting an open legal framework around all of that. So before everything happened, okay, I give you the link or I give you the code and, send it back or whatever. Now, and we didn't know under what conditions. Now we have a proper legal framework. For open source software, it's been in place for a long time. It's really, it's completely integrated. That's, I think, almost the only way of working for developing open source software at CERN. And when I say open source, I really mean, in the strictest sense of the word, as defined by some of the open source and the open source initiative and the FSF. For hardware, it's been a little bit the same story, but more recently. I want to share the design of my electronic cards. How do I do that? I want to work the same way as the software guys. Please help us put it. And so this is what we did. We developed also a legal framework around that, and that helped. That really helped in making, reassuring the lawyers in the different places, whether it's in industry or in the other institutes who we work for, so that at least we know what we're managing risk, let's say. So that was one element. The other element, I think, that helped also continue working in this collaborative mindset is making sure that we have a good visibility all along the value chain. Meaning at least more so for open source hardware, let's say, because you're not just writing lines of code. You also have to consider the fact that somewhere along the way you need to manufacture things, you need to buy components, you need to make sure you have quality control, you need to make sure you have a certain number of other things. You need to have your procurement guys also on board. You need to consider the fact that, okay, what you're trying to do somehow is perhaps avoid a monopolistic situation, make sure you don't have vendor lock-in through developing under open hardware. You also have to consider, well, I'm designing something. I also need the tools that will help me design this ASIC or this electronics open, so that we do have accessibility for everyone who would like to contribute to be able to. So the accessibility in terms of the tools, in terms of the legal framework, in terms of, let's say, just simple access. And I think it's a question of developing an entire ecosystem around that open source development. And if you manage to do that, I think you have a winner.
And I'm wondering, I think people like researchers, developers, engineers want to collaborate with other people with some expertise. And what you're sharing is a way to enabling them to do things. And one of my questions is, do you think it's enough, or do we need some kind of strategy or policy regarding each organizations? And in which, what do we need to have more strategy, more strong strategies on it, or is it enough and we just follow what people want to do?
Well, I can only talk about the experience at CERN, but from what I could see, and what I can hear about what the counterparts of our technical experts are saying. I mean, they really want to collaborate. That's the way they develop things. You know, it's about standing on the shoulders of giants and making sure that you have all these incremental changes. So for us, it's really the way of developing it. And I think if you see that in some systems, in some research institutes, researchers will get a monetary incentive to declare their invention or the technology, and will then get another financial incentive if there's a patent which is filed, etc. I think this goes to show that the natural way is more open than, let's say, monopolistic in a way.
Interesting. Maybe it's just to have some last discussion regarding our roundtable. Regarding the platform, how can we help people with tools, with platform to work together? Philippe, do you have? I think you have such tools you are giving to people, developers.
Okay. I mean, when we see people in our research projects, and some of them open source their code directly using one of the four, such GitHub, they think that it will be magic. Some magic will happen. You know, you push your code on the server, and then everybody will jump on it. So I just kindly tell them, hey guys, there are 200 millions of servers there. So how do you want to be identified? So it's not possible. So you can do the best code of your life. You can have a wonderful documentation. It's not enough in the middle of this forest of code. So the other option that they have, they will join a software vendor, Google, Amazon, or other, and we saw that. And the guy, yes, they usually have a strong marketing team to promote your stuff. And but you get in trouble at some point because this organization can decide to log the server. They decide, like, and we saw that with MongoDB, we saw that with Elasticsearch, some very famous open source solutions, which at some point the guy said, okay guys, until the version N, it's free, and now after this one, we decide to keep it for ourselves. So you build a community, and now we will take advantage of this community for ourselves. The third option is going with open source foundations, because they are for non-profit organizations, and these guys are here to help really by providing governance of a community, because yes, community is important in terms of governance. It's not the guy who speaks loud who can push his idea. It's really a common decision. It's not because it's your best friend or because he has more money than others that he can also push more his competence than others. It's very important to have this vision of, yes, he has a common vision as the others, and in which direction the project should go. So he deserves to be part of this project, and he can be part of that. And if there is an issue, you must be able to talk with somebody which is completely vendor neutral to say, oh yes, okay, this guy really deserves to be part of the project versus the other one that maybe doesn't not. And after that, you also have all this aspect of licensing. We spoke a little bit about licenses, but open source licenses are pretty complex. When you go and dig a little bit more, you realize that there are more than 100 licenses, open source licenses. Today, 10, we'll say, are really mainly used, but we have 100 of them because everybody at some point wanted to have his own license. And so you need to understand which license works which one, with the other one. So if you decide to have a dependency with this component, you might have a huge impact on your business. And Eclipse, for example, but other foundations as well, they have a legal team which is here to help our project to identify the potential issue, because the idea at the end is, okay, if your code is freely available in our portfolio, it means that anybody else can use it and can make business from that without any trouble. And last but not least, the infrastructure. You need to have an infrastructure which is reliable, accessible for everybody, and it's very important. For this reason, I think it's, the tool and the approach provided by a foundation give you all these pillars, best practices, and others that you need to be able to achieve some reliable open source solution for yourself, for your research, or for your business.
Thanks. And Liz, regarding open space makers, you are managing a lot of collaboration from diverse heterogeneous kind of contributors. And for that you design an open platform, open source platform itself. Can you give us some words about it?
Yeah, sure. So federation is based on a network of space actors, but also contributors, federated around this association, which organize the distribution, the provision of collaborative tools and support and help the development of open projects. So, so Federation has developed a platform, an open platform, where we provide a lot of tools, different tools such as project management, sharing knowledge, tools for helping design, and so on. So basically, anyone who wants to contribute to a project can contribute on this platform, and every project carried out within the Federation activities are as part of open collaboration, and all the results are open source under open source licenses. So so when we so Federation is relies a lot on third places, on an existing ecosystem such as the Makerspace, Hackerspace, or Fab Labs. So the association benefit from this kind of local hubs to be able to connect the people and to give access to a lot of materials necessary to running the project. So those local hubs facilitate the collaboration and the connection between all the members, which are located in different places around everywhere in France, and we hope maybe in Europe later, in a future soon. So they work together on an online platform where they can contribute openly on different matters. And they also have access to different materials, very specific materials, where they couldn't have access outside those third places. So with those third places, we animate. Federation animates this community of contributors and space actors around all those projects. About the outcome, because we already have some outcomes, we work a lot with the higher education to make sure to facilitate the student-led project and make them doable and reusable. And we have some partnership, for example, with the association Planet Mars, and working on the in-situ resource utilization. But we also have partnership with Make Avenir, with a school of engineers, where we have students who can work on different projects on the platform within Federation activities. And we also have we already published some open source project, so it's open and anyone can have access to the GitLab of the project and see the documentation and all the work that the teams work on. So we also have, some of the projects carrying out within the Federation activities are based on conventions, partnership we have with public institutions such as CNES and ArianeWorks, with, for example, Ad Astra projects. So yeah, we have a lot of activities that demonstrate the effectiveness of open collaboration and open source.
Thanks. I think everybody here, if you are interested in open collaboration in the space industry. You should have a look at those platforms. Very interesting projects. We have 5 minutes left for questions. I don't know if we can share. Yes, there is some question. And can we share a link, or do we have to do it? I can't. Thank you.
Thank you for a very interesting panel. Could you please name maybe 2, 3 as you think the most useful and prominent open source projects for startups and new companies that are exploring space economy? Thank you.
Sorry, not sure to understand your question, sorry.
Can you name 2, 3 open source projects that can be useful if you are a space startup and work in a space economy? Some just like 2, 3 concrete things that should be Googled and used first and checked first to get some value from that.
Well, we have a lot of open source projects within Federation. So some of our teams are working on the upper stage reuse. I think under the contract with GNF, for example, and it's open, and anyone who wants to contribute can contribute to this project. We also have which project, for example, the open launcher for microsatellite and nanosatellite with Ad Astra, and in particular its subject Themis Open on Open Launcher 2. What else? Let me think. We have also a project on orbitography software, I think, with the IO software engineering, which I think is working on different locations. Some of the team are developing on a location, and other team are working on in another location on other aspects of the project. And I talk also about the Boomerang project with the reuse upper stage. And what else? Well, I think there are a lot of open source projects and that are accessible to anyone who want to have a look at, or better to contribute to in the web sub of federations. If you can check on that.
Thanks. Do we have another question, I think? Yes, maybe 1 or 2.
Hello, my name is Lord Bentel. I'm from SGSC. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll introduce myself again. My name is Lord Bentel from SGSC. I am from Ghana, and I am in a software community, and actually one of the communities I'm part of is called Linux Accra. So basically, we talk about open source software and how to apply it. And I think this particular topic was of interest to me because I have an interest in space. So I think connecting the gaps between software and then space, I think has been one of the questions that I've been thinking about and haven't really answered. So I found this particular presentation very interesting. I think my question actually is that for Africa, I think a lot of our challenges has to do with the hard knowledge in the area, because a lot of us don't necessarily have space industries. So, like, what would be some of the ways we can close the gap between from having the software skills already? How do we close the gap to the space industry? Is the question clear? Okay, so basically, we have a number of communities around software, open source software, but then to play a role in the space industry, we have maybe a knowledge gap in terms of space, maybe how rockets work, or I think you mentioned something on ground stations. So I'm wondering what to be like some approaches we could take to close the gap between the software, like, okay, having the open source software basis, how do we connect to the space industry?
Does someone want to answer?
I can try to provide an answer. And unfortunately, I'm not an expert in space, but in this area. But I think it's still the same story. It's if you have something valuable and you are able to communicate about your software, people will find you. If you consider that what you are delivering, it's enough, you just send the code and guys, now you're on your own. I don't have time to take care of that. I don't provide any documentation. I don't provide any getting started to understand. Then there are very few chances that somebody will adopt your technology. Now you might be alone in your room and just develop something very smart. But if you provide all the information around, all the assets around to make it usable, you can have a success. I used to steal the sentence from Eric Gamma, one of our main thinker on software engineering, and he used to say that a bug is a loving letter. And what does he mean by that? He said that to write a bug, first the guy needs to find you. Then once he found you, he read your general presentation and he finds it interesting. He say, okay, let's give it a try. So he downloads your stuff. And once he downloaded it, he tried to install it and was able to install it. So when he installed it, he started to run it. And then he finds a bug. Two options, he say, okay, it's crap, and he throw it away. Or he say, wow, I find it really interesting. I want to move a step further. So he writes you a bug. And if you don't answer immediately to this bug, to this loving letter, that you completely miss the point. And I think so it's really this approach that we try to explain to people that when you open source your code, it's a strong commitment that you take. And the commitment is, yes, guys, I will provide all the support that you need to understand what I did and to improve it, what I did, to fix what I did with you, with your support. If nobody's interested, nobody's interested. For this reason that at the same time, I said to the others, to the user of open source, I tell them, open source is like a puppy. You can receive it as a gift, you receive a puppy, and you can have fun with it. You play with it, it's really nice a puppy, and so on. But if you don't feed it, the puppy will die. Open source is exactly the same thing. So you need to feed open source project that you reuse. You cannot just reuse it and say, okay, it's free, or I use it. No, it's not free as a beer. It's free as we say, as a speech. So it's just, we have the freedom to express yourself, and people have the freedom to provide you feedback. And just a simple feedback saying that, wow, your last release is much better than the previous one. Or guys, I wrote a small document to explain how to install on this kind of machine. If you want to take it, grab it. It's a contribution. You don't need to fix a bug for them, but just providing these kind of feedbacks are very helpful. And then the community will grow up like a snowball. So I think, and it will be the same kind of story I think in space, if you are able to build this kind of software and create a community around that, early adopters, and then after that provide this kind of best practices around that, you are able to close the gap between industry and your software.
And
did I answer to your point?
And I think we're a bit late, so we can discuss after that. One of the points is that every people, even in the space industry, are using open source software. We are all interested in how open source can foster and improve what we are doing. And what we need is to achieve collaboration. And I think both panelists, each of us and you yourself, are trying to collaborate with, I wanted to collaborate with other people. And I think it's the main goal, is the collaboration more than the open source. Open source is just a way to collaborate. So it will be my conclusion. Thanks a lot for all of your speak and insights you shared with us. I hope we gave us some highlight about how open models might, I would say, benefit to space industry. We're convinced of it. And if you have any other question, we can discuss outside with pleasure. Thanks a lot.